This morning, the man accused of planning the murder of Tupac Shakur is set to stand trial as prosecutors look to prove Dwayne Davis orchestrated the drive-by shooting that killed the hip-hop legend nearly 30 years ago.
Nearly 30 years after Tupac Shakur was assassinated, his case has reached another major moment.
We are here today to announce the arrest of 60-year-old Dwayne Keith Davis, a.k.a. Keefy D, for the murder of Tupac Shakur.
The man accused of helping plan the deadly attack is now facing the final consequences of the case. But many questions still remain. What really happened that night in Las Vegas? Who fired the shots? For years, fans waited for answers. His family waited too.
Tupac knew deep down that he was always meant for something great. Before anyone recognized his name, he knew he had the dream to have a star here on the Walk of Fame.
Now, with the sentence becoming final, it may feel like the end of a painful story. But could there still be one last secret hiding behind Tupac's death, waiting to be revealed? Join us in this video as we reveal the details. Tupac Shakur's shooter sentence is irrevocable. Nearly 30 years have passed since Tupac Shakur was shot and assassinated in Las Vegas. For years, the assassination remained one of the biggest unsolved cases in music history. Tupac was only 25 years old when his life ended. He had been sitting in a car with Death Row Records boss Suge Knight when another car pulled up beside them. Gunmen opened fire. Tupac was hit several times. He later died from his injuries. The people responsible were never brought to trial. That changed when Dwayne "Keefy D" Davis was charged in connection with the assassination. Davis has pleaded not guilty. He is accused of helping plan the attack and providing the gun used in the shooting. But prosecutors do not need to prove that Davis was the man who pulled the trigger. Their case is based on the idea that he helped make the assassination happen. That difference is very important. The prosecution's case is expected to focus heavily on what Davis himself has said about the night. Over the years, Davis has spoken about the shooting in ways that prosecutors now believe can be used against him. One important moment came in 2008, when he spoke with federal investigators. Another came years later when he discussed the shooting in a memoir. In those accounts, prosecutors say Davis placed himself close to the people involved in the attack. He also allegedly talked about providing the gun. Those statements could become some of the most important evidence in the entire case. Normally, an assassination case may have a weapon, fingerprints, DNA, video footage, or other physical evidence. This case is different. The assassination weapon was never recovered. The car believed to have been used by the attackers was also never recovered. There is no major DNA evidence tying Davis to the shooting. There are no fingerprints that clearly place him at the scene. That means prosecutors have to build their case in another way. They have to use words, people, old records, and other pieces of information to create a clear story for the jury. Prosecutors are expected to say that the shooting was not random. They believe it came from revenge. Earlier that night, an argument and fight happened at the MGM Grand. Davis's nephew was reportedly involved in that fight, and Tupac and people around him were also connected to the incident. Prosecutors believe the fight helped create the anger that led to the shooting later that night. The case also involves the long-running rivalry between two sides of the music world. Tupac was closely connected to Death Row Records. On the other side was Bad Boy Records, which was connected to rapper the Notorious B.I.G. and music executive Sean "Diddy" Combs. The rivalry between the two sides had become very serious. It was not simply about music anymore. There was anger, threats, violence, and strong loyalty between different groups. Prosecutors are expected to use this background to explain why revenge may have played a role in Tupac's death. They may also bring in experts who can explain how gangs worked and how members followed their leaders. This is important because the assassination charge against Davis is connected to allegations of gang activity. The prosecution is expected to argue that Davis was part of the planning and helped the people who carried out the attack. Another major part of the case will be the witnesses. Suge Knight could also become an important figure in the case because he was sitting in the car with Tupac when the shooting happened. Knight was injured but survived. His account of that night could help prosecutors explain what happened from inside the vehicle. But there is a major problem. Nearly 30 years have passed. People do not remember everything perfectly after such a long time. A person may remember something clearly, but forget small details. Another person may remember the same event differently. Can prosecutors prove Davis's role beyond a reasonable doubt? And what will the jury decide? Stay tuned for more. What the jury must decide. The trial will not simply be about whether Davis knew Tupac or whether he was part of the same world. The jury will have to focus on one much bigger question. Did prosecutors prove that Davis helped make the assassination happen? That is the heart of the case. Prosecutors are expected to tell the jury that Davis was not just an innocent person who happened to be nearby. They will argue that he played an active role. They say he helped organize the attack and provided the weapon. If the jury believes the prosecution's story and believes it has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt, Davis could be convicted. The possible punishment is extremely serious. He could face life in prison without the possibility of parole. But before that can happen, prosecutors have a difficult job. They must take events from 1996 and connect them to Davis in a way that leaves the jury with very little reasonable doubt. They cannot simply tell the jury that Davis talked about the crime. They have to show why those statements should be believed. They also have to connect those statements to other facts. This is why the witnesses will matter so much. The prosecution may try to build the case slowly. One witness may explain the fight at the MGM Grand. Another may explain the people involved. Another may talk about the gang connections. An investigator may explain what police knew at the time. An expert may explain the relationship between the different groups. Then prosecutors can use Davis's statements to bring those pieces together. Their goal will be to make the story feel complete. The defense will try to break that story apart. They will look for mistakes. They will look for missing evidence. They will question old memories. They will challenge witnesses. Most importantly, they will try to create doubt about Davis's role. The lack of physical evidence could become one of their strongest points. There is no recovered assassination weapon. There is no recovered car. There is no clear forensic trail showing Davis committed the shooting. The defense can tell the jury that a serious accusation needs strong proof. They can argue that words from decades ago should not be enough if those words cannot be supported by solid evidence. Another major question will be whether Davis himself takes the witness stand. If he does, he could explain why he made the statements that prosecutors are using against him. He could tell the jury what he says really happened. He could also explain why parts of his earlier accounts may have been wrong or exaggerated. But there is a serious risk. Once Davis takes the stand, prosecutors can question him directly. They can bring up his previous statements and ask him to explain any differences. If his answers do not match what he said before, the prosecution could argue that he is changing his story to escape punishment. Because of this, his lawyers will have to think very carefully before deciding whether he should testify. The jury will also have to deal with the huge amount of information surrounding Tupac's death. For almost 3 decades, people have created theories about who assassinated him and why. There have been books, documentaries, interviews, rumors, and countless discussions about the case. But a courtroom works differently. Jurors cannot simply decide based on something they heard years ago. They must look at the evidence that is allowed in court. They must listen to witnesses. They must consider documents and statements that the judge allows. Then, they must make a decision based on the law. This is especially important because being found not guilty does not automatically mean that the jury believes Davis is completely innocent. A not guilty verdict means the prosecution failed to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. There is also the possibility of a hung jury. That could happen if the jurors cannot reach the agreement needed for a verdict. Another major legal issue could come later if Davis is convicted. His lawyers have already raised questions about the 2008 interview with federal investigators. Davis reportedly claims that he believed the interview was confidential and could not later be used against him. If he is convicted and the issue remains important, his lawyers could challenge the use of that interview during an appeal. For now, the biggest battle will happen inside the courtroom. Prosecutors must convince the jury that Davis's words, the witnesses, the gang evidence, and the history surrounding the shooting all point in the same direction. The defense must convince the jury that there are too many unanswered questions and too many holes in the prosecution's story. After so many years, the case has reached a point where old words and old memories could decide the future of one man. After nearly 30 years of questions and silence, what happens when the man at the center of the case finally speaks for himself? Keep watching for more. Davis speaks before the trial. Just days before the trial was expected to begin, Davis gave a rare interview while sitting in jail. The interview gave people a chance to hear from the man at the center of the case. It was not a normal interview. Because of security rules, the news team was not allowed to place a microphone on Davis. His answers were therefore shown through subtitles. Still, the meeting was important because Davis has been connected to the Tupac case for many years. One of the biggest questions put to Davis was very simple. Did he have anything to do with Tupac Shakur's assassination? The question went straight to the heart of the case. However, the interview did not give a clear and complete answer to that direct question. That leaves the issue open for the courtroom, where prosecutors will have to present their evidence, and Davis's lawyers will have the chance to fight the accusations. Another important part of the interview focused on the book Davis wrote about the events. He was asked whether he regretted the book and his earlier interview about Tupac's assassination. Davis appeared to admit that he had some regret about making those public statements. For years, Tupac's assassination was surrounded by silence, rumors, and guesses. The interviewer also asked Davis whether anyone close to him had warned him not to talk about the assassination. The question was based on a simple concern. If a person talks openly about a serious crime, could those words later be used against him? Davis had spent years speaking about the case, and now he was facing a criminal trial. That made his earlier decision to speak even more important. The reporter also pointed out that Davis had described the assassination in a way that sounded believable. His story appeared to move from one event to another. First one thing happened, then another, and then another. To someone listening, the story could sound like the account of a person who knew what happened. That does not automatically prove that every part of the story is true, but it explains why his statements have received so much attention. Prosecutors can point to a person's own words and ask the jury why someone would know certain details if he had nothing to do with the crime. The defense, on the other hand, can argue that Davis may have exaggerated his story, changed parts of it, or spoken about it for attention or money. This fight over his words could become one of the biggest battles in court. The interview also moved away from the legal side and touched on Tupac's family. Davis was asked whether he had thought about Tupac's relatives when he decided to speak about the assassination and write about it. That question carried a lot of weight. Tupac was not only a famous rapper, he was also a son, a friend, and a family member. His death affected the people closest to him, while millions of fans around the world continued asking what really happened. For the family, every new claim about the assassination can bring old pain back. Davis was also asked about the possibility of a plea deal. The reporter wanted to know whether prosecutors had offered him a deal and whether he would accept one. The available answers were not clear enough to establish exactly what happened. Still, the question showed how serious the case had become. A plea deal could allow a defendant to avoid the full risk of a trial, but it could also require him to accept some form of responsibility. For Davis, the choice would be extremely important. He is facing a case that could affect the rest of his life. If the jury finds him guilty, he could face life in prison without the possibility of parole. That means the possibility of spending the rest of his life behind bars is very real. The interviewer asked Davis how worried he was about being convicted. He was also asked about the possibility of spending his final years away from his family. This brought the situation down to a very personal level. The case is not only about Tupac's death anymore. It is also about what could happen to Davis if the jury believes the prosecution's case. With Davis's own words now under the spotlight, will those statements help prove his guilt or give the defense a chance to tear the case apart? Let's delve deeper. The questions that could decide Davis's future. The biggest question now is whether the evidence against Duane Davis will be strong enough to convince a jury. Davis does not have to prove that he is innocent. The responsibility belongs to the prosecution. Prosecutors must prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. That means they have to give the jury enough solid evidence to believe that Davis played the role they say he played in Tupac Shakur's assassination. The prosecution is expected to focus heavily on Davis's past statements. This could include things he said during an interview with investigators and information connected to the book he later helped produce. His own words may be one of the strongest parts of the case, but they could also become one of the biggest areas of attack for his defense lawyers. The defense can ask a simple question. Why should the jury believe everything Davis said years ago? People sometimes tell stories for different reasons. They may want attention. They may want money. They may want to make themselves look important. They may remember things wrongly. They may also change their stories over time. Davis's lawyers can use these possibilities to create doubt. They can tell the jury that talking about a crime does not automatically mean a person committed it. They can also question whether every statement Davis made was accurate. The book itself may receive close attention. Davis did not write it completely alone. Another writer was involved. This could allow the defense to question how certain statements were written and whether every part of the story came directly from Davis. That could become important if prosecutors try to use the book as proof of his involvement. Another problem for the prosecution is the age of the case. Tupac was assassinated almost 30 years ago. That is a very long time. People forget things. Memories change. Details become harder to remember. Some people who knew what happened are no longer alive. Other people may remember the same event in different ways. The defense can use this to question witnesses. They can ask where a person was that night. They can ask what the person saw. They can ask how far away they were. They can ask whether the person had a clear view. They can also ask if anyone else can confirm the story. These questions may sound small, but they can become very important in the assassination trial. If a witness makes a mistake about one detail, the defense may use that mistake to question the rest of the person's story. The lack of physical evidence could also become a major issue. The assassination happened in 1996, and important pieces of evidence were never recovered. The gun used in the shooting was never found. The vehicle involved in the attack was also never recovered. There is no major forensic trail directly connecting Davis to the shooting. Because of this, prosecutors may have to build their case with words, witness accounts, old records, and other information. They will need to connect those pieces carefully. They cannot simply tell the jury that Davis was talking about the assassination. They need to show that his words match the facts. They also need to show that those words prove his role in the assassination. Another important question is whether Davis will testify in his own defense. If he takes the stand, he could explain why he made his earlier statements. He could tell the jury what he meant. He could explain what he believes was true and what he believes was wrong. That could help him, but it could also hurt him. Prosecutors would have the chance to question him directly. They could bring up his older statements and compare them with what he says in court. If the stories are different, prosecutors could tell the jury that Davis is changing his story because he is now facing prison. This is why his lawyers must be very careful before making that decision. The trial will also have to deal with the huge public interest in Tupac's death. Before that final night in Las Vegas began, what events in Tupac's difficult past helped shape the man who would walk into that city? Let's find out. The journey that led to Las Vegas. On September 7, 1996, Tupac Shakur traveled to Las Vegas for what was supposed to be a fun and exciting trip. He was going there to watch a big boxing match between Mike Tyson and Bruce Seldon. He also had plans to perform at a local club after the fight. At that time, Tupac was one of the biggest names in music. His career was moving very fast, and almost everywhere he went, people knew him. However, Tupac was not very excited about going to Las Vegas. People close to him said he had other family matters on his mind. He reportedly wanted to deal with some personal issues in Atlanta and did not really want to make the trip. Still, after his manager, Suge Knight, encouraged him to go, Tupac agreed. He left for Las Vegas, not knowing that it would become the final trip of his life. Tupac did not travel alone. His girlfriend, Kidada Jones, and his cousin, Jamala, were also part of the trip. However, Tupac wanted them to stay at the hotel while he went to the boxing match. He reportedly asked them not to come downstairs. The plan was simple. Tupac would go out with the men in his group, watch the fight, enjoy the night, and return later. Kidada and Jamala stayed behind as Tupac left the hotel. There was no reason for them to believe that anything terrible was about to happen. At this point in his life, Tupac had already lived through many difficult experiences. His childhood had been far from easy. His mother, Afeni Shakur, had been connected to the Black Panther movement. She was arrested as part of a case involving members of the group and spent time in jail before Tupac was born. Tupac was born on June 16, 1971, in New York. His mother gave him the name Tupac Amaru Shakur. The name was connected to a South American revolutionary figure. From a young age, Tupac grew up around strong political ideas, family problems, and financial struggles. His father was mostly absent from his life, so he did not have a steady father figure growing up. This left a major gap in his childhood. Tupac and his mother also faced serious poverty. There were times when they did not have a stable home. Life could be uncertain from one day to another. He saw people struggling with poverty, substance, violence, and other problems around him. These experiences later became important parts of his music. Tupac often spoke about poor people and those who felt forgotten by society. He talked about people who had very little power and had to fight to survive. His music was strongly connected to the life he had seen. Even though his childhood was difficult, Tupac found something that gave him hope. That was art. When he moved to Baltimore, he attended the Baltimore School for the Arts. The school gave him a different kind of life. He was around young people who were interested in acting, music, dance, and other forms of art. Tupac quickly became interested in acting and rap music. He found a place where he could express his feelings and ideas. He also began to understand that he had more than one talent. He could write, perform, act, and connect with people. The school helped him see a future beyond poverty and the problems around him. But another major change came when Tupac moved to Marin City, California at the age of 16. Life there was not easy either. The area had problems with poverty and street violence. Tupac was young and not physically large, but people who knew him described him as fearless. He learned how to deal with the difficult environment around him. California eventually became an important part of his story. It was there that he began building relationships that would help move him toward music. His surroundings gave him experiences, and those experiences later became stories in his songs. Music slowly became his way out. As a teenager, Tupac briefly became involved in selling substances. He did not stay in that life for long. He reportedly saw how badly substances were affecting people and began to understand that he did not want that future for himself. One experience, involving someone offering valuable personal belongings for substance, reportedly affected him deeply. Tupac decided he would rather struggle than continue selling substance. He wanted to make music instead. At about 17, he began taking rap more seriously. He formed a group called Strictly Dope with his friend Ray Luv. They performed wherever they could. After everything Tupac had survived, how did his rising fame and growing controversies bring him closer to the danger waiting in Las Vegas? Let's take a closer look. The star, the controversy, and the attack he survived. Tupac's talent eventually took him far beyond the streets where he had grown up. Music was not his only dream. He also wanted to act. In 1991, he appeared in the movie Juice, and the role helped introduce him to an even larger audience. His performance showed that he could do more than rap. He could also act and hold people's attention on screen. The success of the movie helped strengthen his growing fame. Tupac was becoming known as an entertainer with many talents. His music career was also growing quickly, but fame brought problems with it. As he became more successful, he also became involved in several controversies. He faced arrests and legal cases connected to different incidents. He was accused of attacking a limousine driver. He was later charged in connection with an alleged attack on another rapper with a baseball bat. He also faced a case involving an alleged attack on film director Alan Hughes. In another case, he was arrested after being accused of shooting 2 off-duty police officers, although he was later released. These incidents created a very strong image around Tupac. To some people, he was a talented young artist who spoke honestly about life. To others, he was becoming too violent and too difficult to control. His relationship with law enforcement was also poor. Tupac often showed anger toward the police. He did not trust them and believed they treated him unfairly. He felt that the authorities already saw him as a problem because of his background and his public image. His behavior only made the situation more difficult. His growing fame meant that almost everything he did received attention. His actions were discussed in newspapers, on television, and within the music industry. The more famous he became, the more people watched him. Yet behind the famous image was a young man who had already survived serious violence. On November 30th, 1994, Tupac was attacked inside the lobby of a recording studio in New York City. The attack was extremely serious. He was robbed of jewelry worth a large amount of money and was shot 5 times. Somehow, Tupac survived. The shooting became one of the most important violent events in his life. It showed that the danger around him was not just something people talked about in songs. It was real. Someone had actually tried to assassinate him. After surviving the attack, Tupac continued with his career. He kept making music, acting, performing, and dealing with the pressure that came with fame. But the shooting became part of the story surrounding him. It added to the feeling that Tupac was living a dangerous life. By the time he was preparing for his trip to Las Vegas in 1996, he had already faced poverty, family problems, street life, legal trouble, public criticism, and a serious shooting. Despite all of this, he continued moving forward. He had become a major star and was reaching more people than ever before. His music had given him a way to speak about the struggles he had seen. His acting had given him another way to express himself. His difficult childhood had shaped the way he looked at the world. His time in California had helped him find music, and his decision to leave the substance world had pushed him toward a different future. But his success also came with a heavy price. His fame made him highly visible, while his controversial image attracted more attention and conflict. The shooting he survived in New York had already shown how quickly a normal day could turn into a life-or-death situation. Still, Tupac continued living his life as he had before. He continued taking risks, making music, acting, and surrounding himself with people he trusted. When he agreed to travel to Las Vegas in September 1996, he was simply preparing for another night filled with boxing, music, and entertainment. He had no way of knowing that the earlier violence in his life had not been the end of the danger. What do you think would be the verdict of Keffe Davis? Share your thoughts in the comments section below. Thanks for watching. If the shocking details surrounding Tupac Shakur's shooter, the final sentence, and the long road to justice caught your attention, please like, subscribe, and watch the next video for more shocking stories, hidden details, and unanswered questions surrounding Tupac's life and death. See you there.